Hi everyone, this is Ashley, the Clinical Manager of the Homeless Programs with the NMCAA, and today this is a case note training. So we're going to talk about why we do case notes, the format you're going to use, and then how you put them in HMIS. So we're going to get started, and first I guess you can see my lovely home office where I'm recording this from, but let's get started with the PowerPoint and the how-to in HMIS. Okay, so let's get started here. Case notes. Excuse me. We do case notes for every encounter we have with a client. So whether that's a home visit or something you're doing with a client outside of a home visit, a phone call, we keep track of cancellations in case notes. Typically, I will put in case notes when check requests for rent are submitted, things like that. So they're important because we need documentation of what we do and how we do it. When funders come to audit us, we need to show a story of what we're doing, and we need to have a track record of the services we're providing, how those services are affecting the client's life, and the progress they're making towards their goals, and eventually leading to an exit plan with our clients. They are accountability for the case managers, so we as managers can see kind of what's going on and get a bigger picture of the client's progress rather than asking you to have a detailed description of everything all the time on all your clients. I can just go in quickly, read the case notes, and know exactly what's going on with the client in home. It's an internal review, like I just talked about, and a time-saving measure. So, like I said, we don't need to have these detailed litanies on each client. I can just go in and quickly, at a snapshot, see what is being done with the client in home. And since we're managing with some programs a 23-county area, it's a good way for me to remotely get in and see what people are doing. And then, of course, we're tracking client progress and staff intervention. I not only want to see what you're doing, but during case review, we need to see what's working and what's not working. And if we are seeing a lack of progress, we can kind of look back at the intervention types that have been given and see if those are those really effective for what we're trying to get across, and is it housing focused? So, characteristics of good case notes. Something we need to remember with our case notes is if it's not written, or in our case typed, it did not happen. So anything you do with the client that relates to housing and part of their program, we need to know about it, and it needs to be documented. This is done through a clear and concise manner. It's brief. It's accurate and complete. They're completed in a timely fashion. They're readable, and it communicates essentially what happened during the meeting or encounter. They're clear and concise, meaning I don't need a paragraph format narrative on everything that's going on with the client, and by the time I'm done 5 minutes later, I'm not really sure where we're going. They need to be clear, concise, get to the point. They need to be brief. They don't need to be these 3-page documents. Now, once in a while, if we have an incident report or something like that, you might need to be a little bit lengthy or extensive, but that's a case-by-case basis. Normally, a regularly scheduled home visit just needs to be pretty brief and to the point. They need to be accurate and complete, obviously, and they need to be completed in a timely fashion. They need to happen, I would say, at the longest you want to give it is a week. I don't recommend a week. I recommend either same day or next day to complete the case notes that happen. I know that's not always possible when we're traveling across county lines, and a lot of your day is spent traveling. But it's whatever works for you. And you and I will talk about how to manage your time, how to prioritize administrative duties versus in-home client services. However, what I found that worked best for me when I was doing case notes was, and case management services, was every morning I would try to get them done if I couldn't the night before. So my case home visits would hopefully end at, let's say, and a day that ends at 4:30, I was back in my office hopefully by 3 or 3:30, depending on client need, things like that. And then I had about an hour to just quickly document what happened that day. I am 100% realistic, and I know that can't happen all the time. However, then in the morning, that needs to be what happened. You don't want a huge span of time going on between you meeting the client and doing your case notes, because you forget. And also, a lot can happen in a week. If we need documentation if something happened and I need that documentation for the client and it's not in there, that's not a good thing. It needs to be timely. And also, often, also they need to be readable. It doesn't need to have a lot of clinical jargon in there. It's just simply what you did and what happened. Here's an example of what not to do before we get into the what to do. We need to be cognizant that we are not conveying our judgments or thoughts about the client in the case note. Clinical impressions that are important for ongoing services, key thing there, important for client services are okay. However, your personal opinions are not. And I don't mean your personal opinions are not okay. I just mean it's not okay to convey the personal opinions in the case note. So clinical impressions, I know we're all coming from different backgrounds, different educational backgrounds, different professional backgrounds. Some of us have master's degrees in counseling, psychology, social work, that sort of thing. Some of us don't. And it's a wide range, and that's intentional that we have a wide range of service providers. You by no means need to have a master's degree to do this work well. So we need to just be careful about what we're putting in there. We don't need to diagnose people in our case notes. We don't need to talk a whole lot about mental illness and symptoms related to that mental illness, because we're not the mental health service provider. I know that can creep in there at times, but if it's not housing focused, if it's not related to their housing, we don't really need to put it in the note. So back to the personal opinion thing. This is an actual case note from one of our way former team members, but it's a case note that I found in someone's file. So we're not saying things like this. Bob made excuses for why he didn't fill out applications. Nothing was done because apparently he didn't have time. He's not making any progress. Okay, that's full of like judgmental remarks, things like that. We don't need that. So it's fact-based. Progress towards goals and plan for next meeting. If you kind of excuse me, remember that, the case notes will be pretty simple, and it'll help you get away from putting anything that you might have perceived, happening. That opinion stuff isn't necessary for a good case note. So the format for a housing-based case management home visit. First thing you want to write is the location and the type of contact. The reason for the contact, what happened during the contact, what you did, what the client did, the plan for the next contact or meeting, and the date and time of, I kind of double stated that, but date and time of next contact, and then you want to put your initials at the bottom. So a housing-based case management home visit is primarily what you'll be documenting. These will be the case notes that you're going to be writing most often, and these can get lengthy, and that's what we're trying to kind of condense them down. The example I'm giving here is pretty lengthy, and it doesn't necessarily need to be. This is just kind of covering all your bases, so to speak. So the first thing, location and type of contact. Let's see if we can find that right here. Staff met with Bob at his apartment on this date for a weekly case management session. That's the location and the type of contact. His home is the location, and type is weekly case management session. So let's get rid of that. Reason for contact. Bob was ready for appointment and had started to prepare his paperwork for needed for his food stamp application. Staff helped Bob complete online application for food stamps and submitted all required documentation. Confirmation number for application was this. So that's kind of the reason. It's a long way to say the reason, and it doesn't need to be that long. But this is kind of like a really good note. So the reason, you could simply state, staff was helping Bob complete his application for food stamps, and we submitted all the documentation online to DHS. Something that short is fine. When I was doing case management, I like to put things like the confirmation number in there so that I had a good reference point, because I'm not very good at keeping things organized by handwriting. I like them all in one kind of managed system online, and it's hard for me to keep track of a bunch of notebooks and pieces of paper and things like that. So this is where I like to keep all my case management stuff. So what happened during the contact? What did you do? What did the client do? So staff also assisted Bob in completing his monthly budget for September. That would be what happened, or kind of what you did. What did the client do? Bob is demonstrating progress towards his goal of sticking to his budget, as he is continuing to make payments on his past due electric bill and has paid all other bills on time this month. So that's his progress, right? Next, Bob continues to struggle having enough money for other needs and will benefit from a food stamp card. So we need to say why we're helping them do what we're doing. Other things we did, staff also provided him with a list of area food and clothing pantries. Obviously, he's having a hard time budgeting, so that would just be a good thing to do for Bob. Next, plan for next contact. Staff also, next appointment on this date, and then so the date and time of the contact and the plan. So staff to follow up with application to DHS, and will address budgeting concerns ongoing during next session. So the next session is on this date, it doesn't say time, but that's okay. You want to at least have the date and what you're going to work on. And then we always want to, right here, initial at the bottom. My last name's hyphenated, so that's why it's 3 letters. You can just put, if your name's not hyphenated, you can just put like AH, or, it doesn't have to be the 3-letter initial, but the initial's good, because then I can quickly see who. There's no other way to track this if you don't put the initial, is basically what I'm saying. So you'll see that in HMIS. There's no way to say you wrote the case note, or for me to track that. So the initial is important, so we know who saw the client. So that would be an example of a home visit. I need to get out of this. There we go. Here is the format for a SPDAT-driven case note. Again, these can get lengthy, and this is like the goal for where we're headed. The last case note that we looked at was maybe in the beginning part of moving someone in. You're going to do a lot of things like that, like getting them hooked up with mainstream benefits quickly after they get housed, things like that. And maybe the SPDAT, we haven't focused so much on that yet. Maybe we've just done the move-in assessment, and we're going to move into case planning in the next couple weeks. Usually all your case notes are going to look like this, the SPDAT-driven case note. Pretty much the same format. We want to have the location and the type of contact. We want to have the goal area that we're working on. What happened during the contact? What did you do? What did the client do? Progress toward that goal, or if there isn't any, you can state that as well. And then again, date and time of next contact or plan for that. And then we want to initial at the bottom. So location and type of contact. Staff met with Bob at his home on this date for weekly case management session. For the session, Bob chose to work on his physical health and wellness. That is this. That is the goal area of the SPDAT, physical health and wellness. And once you get, if you haven't been already, trained in the full SPDAT, this stuff will make sense. Staff talked with Bob about his reluctance to seek out medical intervention. Bob stated he does not enjoy going to the doctor, as he does not feel as though doctors understand his medical needs. Staff offered support and offered to attend medical appointments with Bob. Staff also recommended assistance in making a list of needs and questions with Bob prior to doctor's appointment. Bob was agreeable to suggestions and agreed to make a doctor's appointment with staff. Staff then contacted the health center with Bob to set up an appointment for a primary care physician. Next available appointments on this date. Staff prompted Bob to start making a list of medical needs, and staff will review it with Bob at the next appointment. Provided Bob with medical center contact info and appointment reminder on his calendar. Also watched as Bob filled his pill container for the week as Bob struggles reading his dosage amounts on the bottle. Staff suggested Bob talk to his primary care about getting blister pack medications to make it easier. His next appointment is on 8/26/16 at 11 a.m. Bob and staff to work on the list for PCP appointment as well as creating a budget. So that pretty much touched on all of this stuff. Again, that's a pretty detailed case note of what the services were that were provided, but that's what we want to do. That's what we want to show. And that's essentially what we do. We do want to, again, make sure it's all tied back to housing. This case note is a little bit clinical in that it doesn't talk a lot about housing. So a way to kind of make this a little bit better would be to get rid of some of the detail and say something about how his physical health is related to his housing. A lot of times people experiencing homelessness for long periods of time are going to come into housing with some pretty severe physical and medical needs, and we need to help them get connected with primary care doctors and things like that. Providing support in the first time is a teaching moment, so teaching Bob about the list, different resources he can get, like a blister pack of medications for his pills, not getting overwhelmed when he goes to the doctor by having a list of questions, supporting him in that doctor's appointment maybe the first time, that sort of thing. All what we do and all are proven to help people be successful in their housing. Other things we want to document. Format for cancellations. We want to document client cancellations of home visits. Some of the programs we have require a certain amount of home visits per month at a minimum, and we need to be documenting that stuff. And also just for consistency on engagement related issues, if I go in and I see, if I don't see a case note or a service transaction in 2 months, but you haven't wrote that the client was out of town or incarcerated in the hospital, whatever the case may be, or that you've tried to go over there every day for the past 2 months and they don't let you in, you're worried if they're alive or dead in the apartment, things like that. That stuff needs to be documented so that we can make a case and try and brainstorm for engagement related issues. So a perfect example, client called to cancel regularly scheduled case management case management appointment on this date. We're going to reschedule for 11/3/16 at 9 a.m. initial it. Easy, simple. That took 15, 20 seconds to type that out. Another example would be if you go to a client's house and they're not home. So client was not home for regularly scheduled home visit. Staff attempted to contact the client via phone, no answer, left message, and left business card and door requesting to reschedule, and then initial. So whenever you're going to a client's house, and you're not always going to call ahead, maybe they know Tuesdays at 10, you see them at home, they're not there, you try to call them, they don't answer, it doesn't look like anybody's home, we want to leave a business card saying please call me, or a message or something like that. And we want to document all the steps we're taking to try to engage the client. If it doesn't look like we're trying to engage the client, that's not helpful to the client and helping them maintain their housing. Format of a client phone call. So every single time you talk to a client on the phone, you do not need to document it. This is more, if you want to think about a client phone call, documentation would be anytime you need to remember what is happening here, that it's good to document it. I don't need to know that they called to say, yeah, I'll be home, or you're confirming an appointment or something. We don't need to document that. We just want to document, excuse me, we want to document things that we need to remember or that's good for the case, like this. Staff was contacted by client A via phone as client was inquiring about, I'm so sorry, the status of her MSHDA HCV. Staff informed client that her initial paperwork was sent to tip of the MIT for processing. Staff informed the client that staff will contact her as soon as more information becomes available. We'll follow up via phone within a week in order to update her on any changes related to the HCV. So this might not have been like a case management client. This might have been someone calling who was enrolled on Housing Choice Voucher waiting list, or something. Usually intake will get those calls, but once in a while case managers will. And you want to document that so that there's a paper trail, right? There's a trail that they called, you told them this. Then if they do call intake, or they call me and say, nobody's calling me back, or I haven't heard from anybody and I don't know what's going on with my voucher, things like that happen a lot. I can simply go into HMIS, pull it up, and see that, yes, you did make contact on this date and you were told this. So it's really just for accountability and covering our butt sometimes. And more often than not, that's why. So really, if it's an important client, if it's important where you think, oh, I'll need to talk about this at a later date, I'll need to remember it, document. If not, don't worry about all the phone calls. Here's the format for a non-home visit case management. So sometimes you'll be doing things outside of the home for the clients, like calling landlords for them. Maybe you get their they're not able to fill out a rental application, you get their signature, and then you fill it out with the information back at the office. You want to document some of that stuff, or that you sent paperwork to people. And again, we want that paper trail for accountability and covering our butt. So for example, staff emailed initial identification documentation to Hannah at tip of the MIT housing on this date. We want to have documentation of what you're doing, when, why, how, okay? Or staff contacted 3 landlords on client's behalf regarding housing placement. Staff left messages for 2 landlords and provided rental subsidy information to 1 other. We'll follow up with calls within the coming week. If you want to add the contact info, I put add contact info and note if relevant. So if you wanted to keep track of those landlords that you're calling in the case note, that's fine too, but you don't have to do that stuff there. So Homeless Management Information System, HMIS. We're going to talk a little bit now about how you actually document it in HMIS. So we're going to go in. This is what HMIS looks like. You're going to become very familiar with this. So the first, I'm going to kind of breeze through this because at this point in the training, I'm hoping you generally know what's going on in HMIS, but of course, you're always going to want to go into Enter Data As, or EDA, and you're going to go into the program the client's enrolled in. So we're going to pretend this person's involved in or enrolled in Grand Traverse ESG Rapid Rehousing. Click on the green plus sign. We're now in that provider page. We want all the notes consistent for the program they're in. Next, we go to Client Point, and you can either type in the person's first and last name, or easier, you look it up by client ID. This is just a client that was enrolled with us several years ago, and I use it for examples. So you can see he's got 85 case notes. There we go. Sorry, let's go back. When you first look up a client, usually it's going to default to this page, which is the Summary tab. Where we want to go are case notes, and that's not on the Summary tab. So you're going to, if it doesn't default to the client profile, click Client Profile, and scroll down. Some provider pages will show all of this information, some won't, so they don't all look the same, but the case note information is always in the same spot. We keep going down past assessments and past call records, and here we are. They're called client notes, but that's where the case notes live. And you can see right here, they're going to have the note date. It's going to give a note preview, and then here's the program they're in. So we want to make sure that that's consistent with what they're actually enrolled in. We don't want some to say HARA ESG Rapid Rehousing, some to say prevention, some to say veterans. We want to make that consistent. To scroll through the notes, you just say next. Here's some more. Next, next, next. You know, first and then the last would be the last notes. I'm sorry, the first notes ever, which was 10/9/2013. HARA screenings is okay if the program is not consistent in the case notes, because HARA screenings is intake. So that's the intake staff's provider page that they're going to document on. So that's fine. If you hover above over here, the little notebook, you just hover there, you don't click, it will give the full note right here, and you don't have to click everything open. If you click on it, it will click the whole note open. And I don't know, yep, you can edit. No, I'll just exit. So you can, if you need to go back in and edit something, you can either click the edit pencil and edit, or you can click, excuse me, that little notebook, and it will come up and you can edit right in here. What else? You can delete notes by clicking this trash can. Please don't, unless you really screw something up on there or something, but typically you're not going to need to delete. To add a note, obviously, add note. If you are in, let's say you, for some reason, are in backdate mode, which you'll learn what that is later in HMIS training, but if you click this little calendar with the check mark, let's just put something else here. Okay, so let's pretend we went in here. We were in backdate mode and it was a different date. You click on this, it'll go to today's date. But usually if you open the note, it will just default. Let me try that again. You add a new client note, it will default to today's date. So if the note date needs to be whatever date you visited or did the service. So let's say you did the home visit on Monday and now today it's Friday. You need to change the note date up here to the date that you saw the client. And then in here, you just type away. When you're done, you initial. So even though I'm in initial, you click save. Now it's in here. And I'm actually going to delete that one because obviously we don't need that. But that's pretty much it. All the case notes live here. We can all see them. So intake can see them. I can see them. Your coworkers can see them. Another thing I will show you so that's why it's really important. We use them for a communication tool also between intake and case managers and supervisors and case managers. When we have audits, the funders always want to see the case notes. And the way I do that, I will show you here. You can print, and I can print all the case notes, the date range. So maybe this client was enrolled forever in our services, but maybe the time of service in a certain program that's being audited is from May to June of 2016. I can say that right here. But usually we'll say all, print, and then it will hopefully, yep, here's our print preview. And we want to say, like, I'll say Phantom, Foxit PDF printer. And I just want to show you guys kind of what this will look like. We save it, and he has 85, so it's going to take a long time here, but and this is how they look. So this is a good picture of, you can get every single case note and what was written on the note, and it's all in one place, 21 pages in this case of notes, but that's how you would print them if you needed to give them to anybody with a release of information, or when I show them, for auditing purposes. So that's pretty much it. That completes the HMIS and case note documentation training. And so what you're going to do now that you've completed the case note training is send me an email at aschmandt@nmcaa.net saying I've completed the case note training, and then I will print you a certificate and log that in the training log. So if you have any questions, always let me know. Thanks.